Hello there, welcome back. How are you doing today? Hope you're feeling good, and I hope you are ready for some storytelling. Today I have a book. It is called The Mistress of All Evil, and it is a book about Maleficent. I'll read the back really quick before we get into it. What of the dark fairy Maleficent? Why does she curse the princess to fall into an eternal sleep? Many tales have tried to explain her motives. Here is one account pulled from those passed through down the ages. It is a story of love and betrayal, magic and fantasy. It is a tale of the mistress of all evil. So it is basically a telling from her side of the story, even though we have the movie, but it's fine. Anyway, this is it. Also, just want to quickly say I'm so sorry for my hair. I can't do anything about it. We're on lockdown until April 9th. So we're going to go through this journey together, and it's going to look like this, and it's going to be hard. But we will emerge victorious. Anyway, let's get into it. So, we have a prologue. The Dark Fairy's castle was slightly eerily silhouetted against a temptress sky by a magnificent spiral of glowing green mist. Suddenly, a brilliant burst of glowing green light shot up from the highest tower, warning every nearby creature that Maleficent was in a terrible rage. Her goons shuddered as the castle shook violently with the power of her anger, sending her beloved murder of crows into flight. For nearly 16 years, her creatures had been searching for the princess, Aurora, but it had all been in vain. Now the girl was at home in King Stephen's castle for her 16th birthday, ready to take her place at the royal court. Maleficent paced back and forth in her private chamber. She hadn't been able to reach the odd sisters by raven or crow. Why didn't they listen to me? She muttered furiously. They should never have trusted Ursula. Maleficent needed the sisters now more than ever, and she feared they were lost to her. She went to the enchanted mirror hanging on the wall. The three sisters had given it to her many years before. Show me Lucinda, show me Ruby, show me Martha, she commanded. The mirror's surface swirled with a glowing violet light. The Dark Fairy had never quite mastered the mirror magic like the odd sisters, and she seldom used their gift. Nevertheless, after a moment, hazy images of the sisters appeared in the glass. They were wandering aimlessly through a large mirrored chamber. They seemed to be calling out a name over and over again, but Maleficent couldn't discern their words. Lucinda, can you hear me? Sisters, I need you, Maleficent cried. For a moment, she thought that the sisters had heard her, because they abruptly stopped their ceaseless wandering. Sisters, where are you? I need your help. With Aurora, Maleficent shouted. Suddenly, Lucinda grew more distinct in the mirror. Her face flickered in the swirling purple haze of magic as she ushered frantic orders to the Dark Fairy. You must get into that castle, Maleficent. Go by fire, go by smoke, go by rhyme, go by any means available to you, but go. Create the mundane instrument of her doom if you must, and send her to the land of dreams. We will be waiting for her. But you must find a way to make sure she never wakes. Our powers are not the same in this place. It's all up to you. Now go. And then, as quickly as she appeared, Lucinda was gone. Maleficent only saw her green face reflected in the mirror's surface. No matter how many times Maleficent called for Lucinda and the sisters, she couldn't summon them again. She smashed the mirror into tiny pieces with her staff, angrier than ever with the odd sisters and their foolishness. Maleficent turned to her beloved pet raven Diablo, who was perched on her shoulder. It seemed the odd sisters are lost in the land of dreams. I told them something like this would happen if they helped Ursula. They didn't listen. The fools. Maleficent tightened her grip on the staff. The green sphere on the end began to glow. I will use fire, smoke, and rhyme. Those meddlesome fairies thought they could keep their darling Rose hidden from me. They thought they could keep her safe, but I know the king and queen have their precious princess within their castle at this very moment. Maleficent stormed to her shall use fire, she cried out as she slammed her staff soundly on the stone floor. Her castle rumbled as a large blaze appeared in the fireplace, followed by a matching fire in Princess Aurora's chamber. Through the flames, Maleficent could see Aurora crying. Poor dear, she doesn't know that she's betrothed to her one true love. All the better. Now I shall use rhyme, Maleficent declared, extinguishing the fire and closing her eyes at the words of her dark spell as they swirled through her thoughts. Bring me to their cherished rose, and bring this chapter to a close. By smoke, by fire, and by night, touch the spindle I shall ignite. Sleep will come for their fair rose, forever trapped in her repose. A tiny wisp of smoke curled ominously from Aurora's fireplace. Maleficent's yellow eyes contrasted brilliantly with the fireplace darkness as she transported herself to King Stephan's castle. Enchant the rose with burning light, no fear, no sorrow, no flight from fright. Let her follow without despair, so she may slumber forever without care. An odious green orb appeared in the princess's room, casting an unearthly green glow in the girl's pale face as she rose from her vanity. The luminescent sphere danced before her eyes, bewitching her to follow it through an enchanted passageway Maleficent had conjured in the fireplace. The spellbound princess followed an orb up a cold, dark stairway, with an archway that eerily resembled a tombstone. Maleficent heard a troublesome good fairy calling out Rose's name. With a flick of her hand, she closed off the passageway, leaving the good fairies behind. Higher and higher Aurora climbed until she reached the tallest tower in the castle. The dark fairy transformed the malignant glowing ball into a spinning wheel, and at last her curse would be complete. As the wheel spins, so does time, unstoppable and divine. Waving my spell of endless sleep in dreamscape she shall keep. The princess reached for the spindle, but hesitated. A force within her seemed to be struggling against Maleficent's evil spell. Touch the spindle, touch it, I say, Maleficent commanded. Her dark magic prevailed over the poor princess, who reached out and lightly touched the spindle's point. The sharp needle pierced into her skin, sending a sickening feeling through her entire body. She felt the life draining from her as her world went black. The princess fell to the floor at Maleficent's feet, hidden beneath the dark fairy's long robes. At that moment, the three good fairies burst into the room, their little faces filled with fear and worry. Maleficent smirked at the trio. You poor simple fools, thinking you could defeat me, the mistress of all evil. Finally, she had Princess Aurora. After all those years, her curse had put their beloved princess to sleep, just as she had decreed. Their attempts to keep her safe had failed. With a flourish, Maleficent swept her cloak to one side. Well, here's your precious princess, she added, cackling triumphantly. The three good fairies gasped at the ghastly scene. Their beautiful Rose's lifeless body lay on the stone floor. Her tiara lay beside her like an omen that she would never become queen. And that is our prologue. Moving on to chapter 1. The Dark Fairy. Black crows circled overhead, following the Dark Fairy as she made her way through the tangled forest, with each step she took, the trees grew increasingly dense. The forest was a living thing, moving and breathing. Its vines curled themselves around her path, unknowingly creating a deep, penetrating darkness as they immersed her in the treetops and obscured the sky. In the shadows, the Dark Fairy could keep grasping trees and vines at bay. Even though she didn't understand that aspect of her magic, Maleficent used it to her advantage. Contrary to the tales surrounding the Dark Fairy, the vines weren't entirely subject to her will. She had heard stories at how she could control nature, how she could direct terrible forests to destroy her enemies. It was ironic, given the truth. Nature had cursed her for her past transgression. Nature was her enemy, and this forest was no different. Though Maleficent could keep the forest in check in the shadows, she wasn't entirely sure what would happen once she let the protection of the darkness provided by the canopy. She wondered if she would be able able to fight off the forest when she wandered into the full blaze of the sun. For now, it gave her great satisfaction to see the emerald greenery wither and retreat before her heat emanated from her staff. The trees on nearby cliffs were joining with the vines, the foliage branded together, creating an army of swords against her. There is nothing more frightening to a forest than the threat of fire. The dark fairy laughed as she sent a surge of green light towards the branches, which recoiled from the heat. She wished the forest would give her a reason to set it ablaze, but she reined in her desire for destruction, reminding herself of her purpose and destination. Maleficent resented having to travel at the time. She hated being so far away from the Sleeping Beauty and the love-struck prince who threatened her plans. A few short days earlier, the princess had pricked her finger on the spindle, just as Maleficent's curse had decreed. Maleficent had ordered her goons to abduct Prince Philip and bring him to her dungeons, where he would be well away from the sleeping princess. She couldn't have him intervening in her masterful plan, but even so, the dark fairy needed help. She needed witches, powerful witches, who could help her bind Sleeping Beauty's curse so that this princess would never wake. If she couldn't kill the princess, Maleficent would have to content herself with Aurora's forever dwelling in the land of dreams. So, the dark fairy ventured to Morningstar Kingdom. How she wished she was travelling by her preferred method of flames, but she wanted the witches of Morningstar Castle to know that she was approaching. She wanted to give them time to grieve the loss of the Sea Witch and the Odd Sisters before she arrived. Maleficent knew the reason for her visit would be obscured by fear if she showed up without warning, so she took her time and walked slowly to Morningstar Kingdom. Following her beloved crows, the canopy was so thick now that she could not see her birds flying overhead, but her magic was strong and it allowed her to see the path that lay before her through their eyes. She loved that aspect of her magic more than any other. It made her feel like she was flying with them, untethered from the world, but Maleficent did not need magic to find her way. The witches' hearts drew her to them, shining like a brilliant beacon among the ruins of some of the greatest witches of their age. Maleficent had sent Diablo ahead to Morningstar Kingdom. As he circled the castle, she could see the extent of the carnage and destruction left by Ursula's wake. Engulfed in the remains of the Sea Witch, the ancient fortress was almost pulsing with hate. Maleficent had no love for Ursula and did not grieve her loss. In fact, she thought the many kingdoms on land and sea were better off without such a power-hungry, foolish witch. Ursula had put all their lives in peril by creating a spell so dangerous that the Odd Sisters were now suffering the consequences. Maleficent couldn't see into the future like some witches and fairies, but she was a good judge of character. She had sensed the amount of power Ursula had been hoarding, and she had been certain that the Sea Witch would betray her sisters. She only wished that the Odd Sisters would have listened to her warning. Maleficent had once loved the Odd Sisters deeply, though lately they were a little more strange relatives, as she barely tolerated and avoided at every opportunity. She struggled to remember them as they once had been, to remember how she loved them, but that feeling, love, was a mere memory. Perhaps it was for the best. The Odd Sisters had troublesome nuances, growing more and more deranged as the years passed. She could no longer feel their presence in the world, or in her heart. She suddenly felt a kinship with the sisters that she hadn't felt in some time. She tried to remember what it was like to care for them, or for anyone for that matter, but she couldn't. And now the sisters were lost to her, too far gone for her magic to reach them. It almost made her sad. Sadness, that feeling eluded her for so long that her memory of it was like a faded dream, and it was where those sisters were, in a dream, lost forever to the waking world. Wandering in dream, alone. Maleficent didn't want to think of what the sisters dreamed of, or what their world was like. Living in their dreamscape meant inhabiting the darkest and deepest places of the mind. She couldn't fathom what secrets sprang to life for the sisters in their new reality. She shuddered at the thought of the land of dreams being invaded by the sisters' nightmares, and she if she would find the sleeping Rose in her own corner of the dreamscapes. Damn those sisters to Hades with their mirrors, rhymes, and lunacy. They just had to save their precious little sister. But the old queen in the mirror had said it best. Like many of us, Maleficent, those loathsome sisters were unable to think clearly when their family was in peril. Maleficent had laughed at the old queen, who she knew was Grimhild. For her to be speaking to Maleficent of concern for family of all things. But she choked down her words like jagged stones, unwilling to speak with the old queen about her daughter, Snow White, who now thrived as queen of her own kingdom. The thought made Maleficent sick. What must it be like to live in such a charmed life, to live untouched by the strife that had been ripping so many kingdoms apart? But that was the old queen's doing, wasn't it? Somehow her magic was even greater now than it had been when she was alive. Grimhild reached beyond the veil of death to keep her daughter and her family safe. Perhaps that was Grimhild's punishment for trying to kill Snow White when she was a child. Grimhild had taken her own father's place in the magic mirror. She would now be forever Snow White's slave, as Grimhild's father had once been hers. She was cursed to be Snow White's protector. Never at rest, she was always watching Snow White while she slept, forever shielding Snow's children and grandchildren, eternally bringing happiness to the infernal brat and her brood. Grimhild's love for her daughter sat in Maleficent's stomach like a cold stone. It caused a tinkling sensation that told Maleficent that was something she should feel, an inkling that this was something that would have touched her heart. But she pushed that inkling down with the others that lived in the pit of her stomach. She imagined that they all looked like broken pieces of headstone. She wondered how they would all fit together there, and how it would be possible for someone so small to carry so much. Sometimes she felt the weight of them and would crush her, yet it never did. She supposed everyone carried their burdens there. It seemed like the perfect place, close to the heart, but not dangerously so. The odd sisters had once told her that Grimhild had also kept the pain in her stomach. To the old queen it had been like jagged glass slicing at her insides. Maleficent wondered what was worse, the heaviness of the burden or the pain of Grimhild's. The odd sisters would have said both were capable of destroying their hosts, but Maleficent felt like the weight of her sorrow grounded her and kept her steady. Without this pain, she might just float away. The odd sisters had decreed that the brat queen and her family were now to be left alone, so as not to anger Grimhild, but Snow White wasn't entirely untouched by the sisters, was she? The old Queen Grimhild could not control her daughter's dreams. That was not her providence, that was not her domain. Dreams belonged to the good fairies, and to the sisters 3. That's the end of chapter 1 and the prologue. I think I'll leave it there, just a little taste. Let me know if you do like it and you want some more. And if not, that's fine. Hope you enjoyed this as a single video.